Lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Go, Sean.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Imitation CAO.
Did you say imitation?
Imitation. or filling the void, or Deputy CAO Ms. Hayes.
Yes.
Anything?
No,
Anything?
There are no
anything?
modifications to today's agenda.
Perfect. With that,
I move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
is it moved and seconded? All those wanting to speak in public comment can come up now.
Alicia, I consider that to be a hostile work environment. She's a deputy county administrative officer. It says right on there. She does a great job. I'm glad to see her sitting in that chair.
Thank you.
Ken Sawatsky, I did want to bring forward one topic here that wasn't pulled. There's a letter in support of the Alcoholic Beverage Control rescinding Dollar General's location across the street from McKinleyville High School liquor license. This to me should never have happened, and I strongly support that. It's just too enticing to put this right in front of the kids. I mean, you have a potential for shoplifting. Dollar store probably doesn't have the best security in the world. I mean, you know, it's a dollar store. And the other thing is it's prone to having people, you know, when you were a kid, anybody connected with any kind of grocery store, knew the kids that stand out in front of the store, hey, mister, will you get me a six-pack of beer, and here's $20, keep the change. And so just to have that right there is not appropriate, shouldn't have happened, and I appreciate you guys moving forward and doing what you can to undo that. It's an attractive nuisance, I think is what I would phrase it as. So I also did notice that we're establishing a petty cash fund in the sheriff's office. It sounds like in McKinneyville. Have no problems with that. It's just when money comes out, a note goes in, then you take the note out of that box and you put the receipt in for what you spent it on. Pretty easy process, eliminates any chance of fraud that way. And hopefully no one will steal their cash box like I guess you guys said you had yours stolen once. So thank you for my opportunity to speak on those consent. Otherwise, it's a pretty mild consent agenda we have here. Maybe that's because Alicia's sitting in the chair. I don't know.
Good morning. Rick Pelrin, Metropolitan Heights, Fortuna. I agree with the previous speaker about the liquor store being across from the high school. But I've got two points I'd like to make, and this is regarding the Humboldt wind project.
Oh, that's not on the
CEQA,
That'll come up on public comment on non-agenda items, right?
is this an agenda item?
No, it'll be it's a non-agenda item, so give us a few minutes and I'll give you the thumbs up, okay?
I follow you. I apologize.
No, you're fine. You're fine. It's confusing to me, so.
Hi, my name is Linda Lee. I live in Manila, and I'm here to address the unconsequential reaction to the scathing grand jury reports that came out this year that shed light on
Again,
inaction.
I'll call you-
Is this public comment time?
It's public comment on consent items. So when I call Rick up, you're gonna go, that's my cue. Anybody else want to comment on the consent calendar? And we appreciate you people coming up to talk. It's all about timing. All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Thank you. We got it? Rick? This will be for items that are not on the consent item.
Okay. So you know who I am, and I'll just start with where I left off. On the Humboldt Wind Project, CEQA Section 21091 requires a written response to, let me just read it. The lead agency shall evaluate comments on environmental issues that are received from persons who have reviewed the draft and shall prepare a written response pursuant to subparagraph B. And later it states, the written response shall describe the disposition of each significant environmental issue that is raised by commenters. The response shall be prepared consistent with Section 15088 of Title 14. I have not seen the written response by CEQA, neither in literature nor posted on the website. And I I expect that that the planning department is preparing those written responses to those comments that were turned in on June 14th of this year. Secondly, my other point is that I called and talked to people at Planning Department, and they are already planning public meetings in early November, even though the FEIR on the Humboldt Wind Project is not completed yet. Well, this indicates to me more of the same of trying to hurry this project up, and this is at the sacrifice of people who are attempting to understand what is in this document. This is a very wordy and complicated document, and I request 60 days from the final preparation of the document and publication, and from the answers to the responses that I just mentioned. 60 days before any public meetings. SECRA requires 25 days. I'm asking for 60 days minimum after the publication of the previously mentioned answers.
All right.
And the
Thanks,
publication
Rick.
of the FEIR.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
You betcha. Ms. Beck and Ms. Rogers?
Good morning, Supervisors. Connie Beck, Health and Human Services Director. We had a proclamation that was going to come before your board this morning, and we had a glitch and an error, and so I want to be able to read a little bit of it because there's a celebration today that everyone, the community, and you all are invited to, and so I'm going to read a few things and hopefully won't go over any time. Humboldt County Mental Health and Supervisors Psychiatric Health Facility are celebrating a half a century of community mental health. And in Humboldt County, tireless advocates such as Gladys Strope led the way to educate in the community, destigmatizing mental health and promoting the creation of new community-based services. In May of 1963, the County Board of Supervisors unanimously approved the establishment of the first community mental health services in Humboldt County. Largely staffed by volunteers, Supervisors Inpatient Psychiatric Unit opened in 1967 on the campus of General Hospital on Harrison Avenue before moving to its present location on Wood Street in Eureka in 1976. I didn't know a bunch of this stuff. It's pretty incredible. In 1969, Humboldt County celebrated first steps in community mental health by naming a wing of Supervisors after Gladys Strope and honoring the work of the Humboldt County Mental Health Society, a precursor of today's Behavioral Health Board. And whereas today Supervisors employs more than 60 dedicated employees who serve over 500 patients annually, that's individuals, with dignity and respect on the journey to recovery. A couple other things that I'd just like to note is Supervisors is the only county-operated psychiatric health facility in Northern California, and Humboldt is also the smallest county operating a psychiatric facility. I have time. Will you start over for me? Thank you.
Hi, good morning. I'm Amy Botzler-Rogers, the Mental Health Director. I appreciate all that Connie shared, and I just wanted to add a bit to that and underline. A piece of the resolution that she didn't include that I think is really critical from my perspective is the part that talks about encouraging all citizens to celebrate community-based mental health services that promote, protect, and enhance the health and safety of all residents in our community. And that's so critical to me because it really is about community mental health, right? SV is a component about that, but we're all working together as partners to create a continuum of care for our community, for those who are struggling with these issues. And SV, Supervisors, is that resource that really serves those who are most severely struggling, those who are most challenged. And so it takes that partnership with everyone else. SV also allows those who are struggling to remain in their community and stay connected to family, friends, natural supports, familiar surroundings, and that's a critical piece of healing. And so we're very fortunate living so remotely to have that opportunity. I wanted to just add kind of a fun fact that I found as I reviewed some of the historical documents on SV and community mental health. It was in 1989, which is 30 years ago now, that one of the first groups of peer support specialists were trained. And I just love that because that's the recovery model, right? That's the opportunity for other people with lived experience to engage and reduce stigma and partner with us and with those that we're serving to really create healing that's sustainable and that serves the whole community. So I was happy to see that was done 30 years ago. It's really part of our values now. It's part of what we continue to do and how we want to see this work and this healing of our community moving forward. So thank you for taking the time.
Thanks, Amy.
Oh, wait. And for any of you who are able, we're doing the celebration today at Wood Street between 11 and 2. Drop in, we'll have a reception. There's lots of really interesting historical documents, some video that you can look at, and there will be snacks. So please join us.
Thanks, Amy. Vida. That's you? Vida? Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah. So good morning. My name is Vita Hoffweber, and I'm speaking this morning for Pacific Coast Federation of Fishermen's Association, PCFFA. Last year across the country, people celebrated 50 years of wild and scenic rivers, another 50-year celebration, and including on the Yuba River and here on the Eel River at the River Lodge. Northern California has the most miles of free-flowing salmon-bearing rivers in California, designated wild and scenic because of their extraordinary scenic, recreational, or fisheries value that shall be preserved in their free-flowing state for us and future generations. The Klamath Act, signed by President Ronald Reagan on October 27, 1986, refers in the first paragraph to the wild and scenic status of both the Klamath and Trinity River basins and calls for the state and local governments to restore anadromous fish populations to optimum levels in both basins. But today we want to focus on what President Reagan did and said, betting his coveted second term by signing on a bill to restore fish and wildlife in the Trinity River Basin, the Trinity Act on October 24, 1984, that he had proposed as governor. Quote, "I am especially pleased to see my early effort bear fruit. The Act states Trinity Basin fisheries restoration is to be measured not only by returning adult anadromous fish spawners, but by the ability of dependent tribal, commercial, sport fisheries to participate fully through enhanced in-river and ocean harvest opportunities and the benefits of restoration. In his signing statement, Reagan said, "The Trinity legislation has enjoyed overwhelming support in both the House and the Senate. The bill demonstrates this administration's commitment to the protection and enhancement of our natural resources in a fiscally responsible manner. In this way, we are all winners." Thank you so much.
Thank you. That is all that's signed in, so anybody else that wants to speak on items that are not on the agenda?
Holly Klingel, I live in Eureka. I am responding to Connie and Emmy and saying thank you. The Arcata Police Department, the Eureka Police Department, the Sheriff's Office, Mental Health, Semper Virens, all of these people are working together magnificently to help my daughter. We're seeing real progress, not for Stephanie, but the way the system works. And I am so grateful to everyone who is helping. Thank you.
There you go.
Once again, my name is Linda Lee, and I hear all this talk about services for mental health in our county, but I just want to remind everyone that we are creating clients for these wonderful folks by leaving people on the streets, especially in the winter. Somebody might end up on the streets because of a couple of strokes of bad luck, but you know, the longer they're out there, they're going to develop mental health, addiction problems, and so, you know, we just keep that sad ball rolling. And I've been pretty disappointed. I was so excited by the grand jury's reports, and I've been pretty disappointed by the response to these reports. You know, I know there's a lot of lofty goals about building up and apartments for all different income levels and ADUs, and you know, we've got some good long-term goals, but we are not addressing the immediate problem of getting people off of the streets, providing shelter, a toilet, a safe place, a locked box where you can put your meager belongings. So we've failed miserably in that. Humboldt County kind of likes to try to pretend like we have a reputation for being a forward-thinking place, and we have that potential. These kind of immediate shelters are being done all over the world, everywhere in the world. Refugees come in all forms and sizes, and we've got our own share of them here, and there's no reason why we can't do something to address that. Everybody goes, oh, they don't want to be sheltered, they like to be, and there are those folks out there, and there's not much we can do for those folks. We can't get everybody into a shelter. But there are a lot of folks who are ready and willing to participate. The people I talk to, a lot of them are willing to pay rent. A lot of them are willing to follow rules. They're willing to put rent toward their upkeep. And, you know, monetary rent, $100, $200, some people say they could afford $300 a month, but they can't afford the status quo that exists in our county and in our country. So, you know, and then the city of Eureka spends $300,000 to market their city with some outside marketing association. Well, that $300,000 could go a long ways towards alleviating the big problem with Eureka's image to the outside world, which is the bedraggled folks dragging along the streets carrying their meager belongings. So I had hoped that this item would be on every agenda of every civic body, but I haven't seen that, so I'm hoping that will be true in the future, and I hope we can just step up our efforts. I'm willing to do whatever I can to help. Thanks.
Ken Sawatsky, karma cloud has been lifted. Thank you, Alicia. This room is very comfortable today for some reason. Prior speaker here. There is the perception that the people are not in favor of the windmill project. Terrigens are being given the bum rush. You don't want to be there. This is just a little bit of fatherly advice. Some things need to be worked out on that project, and they need to be addressed. Some environmental concerns and some job concerns need to be addressed if that's to move forward. If that's not addressed, then so be it. The project, in my opinion, is muerto, and so be it. I wanted to talk a little bit about, I call it Amy Gate. I don't want to be an attorney, Kent Sawatsky, non-Esquire, but I do get great enjoyment or learn to have great enjoyment. I guess a job description would be someone who helps with depositions and discovery. That always interests me. Here's an example of good discovery. In a case I was involved in, my attorney told the person against me, he said, I'm going to take and call you to the stand, put you under oath. I'm going to take 5 minutes and read some of your testimony taken in a deposition, ask you to confirm you said that, and we're done. The opponents had put on 8 hours worth of testimony. The judge was tired. We took less than 10 minutes. And of course, 90 days later, we had a judgment for frivolous lawsuit against that individual. That's what I enjoyed. I guess it'd be a deposition consultant or discovery consultant. I'm very good at that. It's the autistic thing, putting the puzzles together, finding the questions you don't want to have asked. And the questions are out there. So here would be some questions. As discovery, it has to be relevant to the case, but it also can be relevant to your credibility. Are you an honest person? Are you a trustworthy person? Have you obeyed laws during life? These are all relevant questions that we can use to establish the credibility of a witness. And of course, questions such as, have you ever engaged in money laundering, tax evasion? Have you ever sold Schedule I drugs? Have you been involved in that business? Have you permitted and facilitated someone to be allowed to engage in this criminal activity? Those are all relevant questions as far as somebody's ability to be honest and testify. So things will be changing, I think, and we'll talk about a little bit later, around a little before 11 o'clock on some issues. I have some recommendations for you folks, and I'll talk about those at that time. But again, as being, I guess you call it a discovery consultant, non-Esquire, that's my field of expertise. Don't want to be, I was talking to a couple of attorneys out front, and they totally agreed that's where the case is made. As soon as you go to depositions, then under penalty of perjury, some people will say, I refuse to answer on the ground I might incriminate myself. Of course, you don't want to be there either. So thank you for my opportunity to speak on that today.
Thank you. Seeing no one else, I will bring it back and move on to special presentations. We have one from the Humboldt County Sheriff's Office. Morning, Sheriff Hansel.
Good morning, Chair Bohn. Thank you for having me here. Thank you, Ryan, for loading my presentation up on the smart board so you can follow along with me today. It's definitely a privilege being here to discuss this because we have definitely come a long way when it comes to cannabis enforcement and doing lots of good operations here in the county to ensure that people are obeying the law. And accountability is key when it comes to laws, and that's why I'm in office. So to make sure that those laws are adhered to. So what I'm going to do is it's going to be about 10, 12-minute presentation, then we can open up for question and answers after that. But if there is something pressing in the moment, please interrupt me and we can address the questions, okay? So we know that Humboldt County's had issues with marijuana for 40 years, but let's just bring it up to speed here. In 2017, we passed the Prop 64, which essentially legalized recreational use. It didn't make marijuana totally legal, right? Everyone's able to have up to 6 plants. 1 ounce of marijuana, but 8 grams of concentrated cannabis. And so this paved the way for commercial cannabis here, where we talk about, selling, buying, transport, and cultivate marijuana legally in California. 6 plants. We know that within this horticulture that 6 plants could be quite huge for people. And you see here, that there are 8-foot tall marijuana plants. And so you see the dilemma that we have because we are complaint driven. People can grow these kind of plants, and it's going to get some eyes turning for sure. But it's made our job, difficult and complicated, but we're definitely up for the challenge. We know cannabis farms in Humboldt. This slide is a little dark, but this is just a snapshot of southern Humboldt. We've had lots of cannabis farms grown out in the hills, lots. The numbers were in 2014 about 15,000 illegal marijuana farms in the county. 15,000 for a county that's 4,000 square miles. That's quite a bit. But when legalization occurred, we knew that there was a couple thousand that really wanted to become legal. And I'm happy to get some numbers from code enforcement from John Ford that says right now we have 1,300 applications that are in the process right now. We have 1,361 that either have an interim or a county permit, and close to 1,000 farms here in the county have state licenses, state permits. So those are really, really good numbers. And I do want to make mention here that our relationship with code enforcement, especially John Ford, I think has done an outstanding job, and I think publicly we should thank him more because he's taken a very, very difficult task and assembled a team that was no small feat to handle all these applications and all these county and state permits. He's been given an impossible task, and he's done quite well with this, with the amount of resources that he's had. So thank you, John. I appreciate your partnership in all this.
Sheriff Hansel?
Yes.
Sheriff, I just wanted to drill down a little bit on the numbers you gave,
Yes.
because there has been some confusion, I think, in the general population about those figures. So as I understand it, and maybe the director or you could correct me, the 15,000 references, as you said, grows. And I think there was some confusion that might be 15,000 parcels. But as I understand it, that's not the case. Now, the legal applications are tied to parcels, so there
That's
may
right.
be it may be that there weren't quite as many growers as we thought.
Yes, that may be the case, but we also know that some of these parcels were illegally subdivided or leased to different people, depending on how big these 100,000 acre parcels are. We see now, as we look at these parcels, especially when people are trying to bring in their illegal grows into compliance with the state law, they're identifying that on their 1,000 acres, they had 6 different locations that had 2 greenhouses here, 2 greenhouses there. And so those are 2 separate sites on one parcel but that's a great question, Estelle. Yes.
Thank you.
I do want to call attention to our partnerships. We could not do it without the great partnerships we have here in the county. We take law enforcement and very, very seriously when it comes to cannabis enforcement. We are doing a multidisciplinary approach with CDFW, that's Fish and Wildlife, CAL FIRE, our state water boards, Cal Cannabis, of course our code enforcement, environmental health, and also the National Guard here. So we are using all of these partnerships to bring the goal of holding people accountable and also bringing people in compliance with the state law. And so with all these regulatory agencies, there comes some issues with working together from time to time. We do have some hangups from time to time, some disagreements, but we're getting through with it with the goal of, obviously, through these partnerships, through accountability, that we are gaining some ground here. And we have found that we do have a reduced amount of illegal farms here in the county. We see it on our flyovers. We've had some historically, year after year we have illegal cannabis farms in different areas. We're flying over and seeing that they're dormant now. And that is what I call a win. And so we are seeing this more and more. And we're doing what we can to make sure that stays. We're staying ahead of the curve there. So, what is our focus when it comes to enforcement? Obviously, we're going after unpermitted county and state cannabis grows. Those are our priority. We know that to sell licensed cannabis here in the state, you have to have a state permit. There's no other way around it. And so we will be focusing on that. And right now, people are in transition and those kind of things. We've said over the course of a time that we can We are allowing people to get that state permit. However, we are hearing, much like you, that people in the interim process or in the application process are growing, and they are in the illicit market out the back door because they can't sell a product that if they don't have a state permit. So as we're starting to gain information there, we could get enough based on that information to secure a search warrant and go after someone who is illegally growing while trying to get a state permit. So that may be coming sometime in the future. But we are a complaint-driven department, and we have historic areas where we go, but we rely on the complaints of the citizens to do this. But also we are working hand in hand with code enforcement on this. Code enforcement, as you know, has been very, very aggressive in their approach of sending notices out and giving people the opportunity to remediate their properties, come into compliance with the law. But they have people that are just hell-bent on breaking the law. And so there's 56 sites that they have tried to gain compliance with that people refuse. They're still growing, still environmental damage, still issues with it. And they've made 56 referrals to us. So far, we searched 20 search warrants based upon their referral and our follow-up to confirm that there's still marijuana growing there. And so those have been very successful, and more are coming on that. Yes.
And if I'm not mistaken, 300 to 400 or more have come into compliance off of that, because is that right? Yeah, it's
Yes.
a big number because I hear it's like an 85% success rate for
Yes.
compliance. So
Yeah,
without
and-
putting people's in harm's way.
Absolutely, and when we have people contact the sheriff's office, say, hey, we got a notice from code enforcement that we're taking care of it. You guys don't have to come. We're taking care of it. We got 30 days. We're working with code enforcement, and so people are taking those seriously, and so I appreciate that. And again, if the problem is taken care of through a letter, then we win. The county wins, the environment wins, and we hope that we can continue to work that way. So we have a focus on environmental damage, and this is a south-facing slope in southern Humboldt. And when you fly over southern Humboldt, 4 years ago, you saw this everywhere. Every south-facing slope, it has a separate greenhouse. You had these illegal grading, and all that stuff looks great in the summertime. As soon as winter hits and the rain, all that stuff sloughs off into the creeks and rivers, and all the sediment and soil amendments go right into our streams and rivers and damages our environment. So we can't have it. That's one of our focuses, stream water diversions. We see this essentially on every illegal grow, and it is something that is definitely an epidemic there, as well as diesel and gas tanks without containment. This is, again, we know that just a gallon of diesel fuel, how much it damages the environment, and we have these all over the county that are contaminating our streams. And we have the famous picture of Mike Downey holding a fisher, but the herbicides, rodenticides, and pesticides that kill fish and wildlife. Carbofuran is definitely something that is affecting our county, and we see the this effect that it has on the wildlife. And Murad Gabriel and others have tested different wildlife and found that this contamination has occurred throughout wildlife, and then also with people that are enforcing cannabis violations, that they get exposed to it, and it could cause devastating health effects. So also human trafficking with marijuana. We found that one of the biggest liabilities for farms is labor. Continues to be labor, and so having the human traffic aspect of things, our people are trained on this, what to identify, questions to ask. We've teamed up with North Coast Rape Crisis to identify when we do come across people that have been victimized through human trafficking on a marijuana farm, that we will bring them out, that we'll get them hooked up with services, that we will try and help them and get them to trust us, because the biggest thing when it comes to human trafficking is for them to be able to tell their story, and oftentimes people would rather not and just get out of that environment. But we want them to tell their story, to tell us what is happening out there. We aren't seeing, there's anecdotal evidence, it's going on all over the place. We are not seeing it. We're not seeing that aspect out there. From time to time, we do come across people that we think may be, and we try to speak with them, but it's those cases are few and far between. Concentrated cannabis, PHO labs, is still very much alive and well here in the county. And from time to time, we have garages that go boom. We have, different areas that we do have the reaction. So we will continue to go after those. Drug trafficking organizations. So in the past, we've had a huge issue with trespass grows on public land, on private land. We've seen a trend over the last couple of years that we're seeing less and less of this. So we did not have one identified drug trafficking organization site on public land last year. And so that is, again, a huge win for us because we continue to fly over. We use National Guard resources to fly over public land. And when we can't find it, that's a good thing. Other parts of the state have had some trespass grows, but we have not. As far as on public land, we've had 4 trespass grows on private property that we've remediated and taken care of. We are finding that through our enforcement efforts, through code enforcement for the Sheriff's Office, that we're driving the industry back indoors. That we see diesel generator grows starting up. We see that they're getting out of view of aerial footage and going underground, going into barns again. So we will be following up on that. We'll continue to do search warrants on those things because we know the devastating impact that it has on through these diesels, but also the wiring when they take over houses and all the hazards with that. So what does the future look like? Let's just talk about our stats this year. We were up this year from last. We had 86 operations conducted. We had over 200,000 marijuana plants eradicated. We had close to 40,000 pounds of marijuana bud destroyed. 4 labs disrupted, 18 arrests, and 87 firearms seized. One of the labs we disrupted was out in Samoa. It was one of the largest BHO labs that we've seen here in Humboldt County. How do we get here? Okay, so a lot of people think, how do you find these grows and that kind of thing? So again, like I said, we have citizens' complaints and we follow up on those. We also have historical grows that we go check out. We get calls in our tip line, 268-2539, our email, hso@co.humboldt.ca.us, and we also have online reporting. People can call and let us know. A lot of times they don't know if something's permitted or not, and they call us, and one of the first things that we do is that we verify, does this particular parcel have a county or state permit? If they don't, we go on the next step. Then we create the evidence that supports a search warrant. We will follow up with overflight, surveillance, drive-by, whatever it takes to verify that there is illegal marijuana being grown on that property. We then obtain a search warrant. And at that point in time, we have to prove to a judge through probable cause that a crime is occurring on that parcel and that there's evidence to be seized on that parcel. And we have to describe the location where that parcel is. So,
Do you share the eye in the sky, our new surveillance at the planning and building department? Do you have access to that so you can have an immediate satisfaction without having to go with a helicopter or anything?
yeah, absolutely. So we have satellite imagery that we have. Code enforcement has given us that ability to.
And that can be used for a warrant also, right?
It cannot.
It
So
can't.
it can't. We have to actually have our own eyes on that. So, but again, it verifies it saves the overflight if we see that there's nothing on that parcel now, because a month ago there was an image that shows there's no marijuana being grown there, and our information was over a month old. Then it can verify that we don't have to go there. So we have to specifically describe the location where to be searched, and that is key here. A parcel number, an address, a GPS location. Those are things the judge needs, and then we will go and look and serve that search warrant. Now, we've had a lot of confusion over the years about, we were at the wrong place. There was a licensed cannabis farm that they contacted, and that hasn't been true this year. We have not served a search warrant where there has been a licensed person there. We've approached gates, and we know in these different areas there's roads with multiple parcels, and we open up a gate. Someone sees us there with the line of sheriff's cars. They get concerned. There's PTSD and those kind of things, and someone who has a county permit, we've told them, hey, if you see us coming, bring out your permit. And that's their equivalent of waving at us, hey, I got a permit. And so sometimes we do stop and we contact them. We say, hey, you got a permit. Congratulations. We're going to move on to this next place over here. Not telling them exactly where we're going to go, but hey, we have your neighbor that we're going to go contact because that's the person we actually have the search warrant for. But we're always accommodating and saying hi to people and making sure that they're in compliance with the law. And so we've had several of those this year, and I think it's been received well. But then there's misinformation out there that we were at the wrong location, which is not the case. So once we have a search warrant, we have 10 days to serve that warrant. We have operations plan put together, and then we drive to location. So this is a typical search warrant. Okay, so we served 86 of these. These are the probable cause, including with pictures and those kind of things that we use to support our evidence to a judge. A judge then signs it, and it's an order from the court that we will go out there to seize that evidence. And so then we create an operations plan. Again, very in-depth plan about what we're going to do, how we're going to serve the search warrant, whose jobs and responsibilities are, and then how we work together with all those code enforcement. So we go there, we make sure that we're visible. We're not coming in the dead of night wearing all black clothing. We are visible, having a sheriff's cars up front, distinguished uniforms up front, making sure that everyone knows we're sheriff's office because of the confusion of potential robberies. We want to make sure that everyone knows we are the sheriff's office. And scene safety is our number one concern. As you see here, we have, these are typical patrol cars that we use to lead our convoys in. But once we get there, we slowly conduct our search. There's nothing that's very, very dynamic. If there's officer safety issues where someone obviously is running or fighting us or those kind of things, then we obviously go forward and we take immediate response. But we're doing a slow, deliberate search to make this scene safe. If there's people that are there, we detain them in handcuffs, and once the scene is secured, then we'll interview them and provide the residents or occupants a copy of that search warrant. The next thing is we document the scene, collect evidence, and collect samples. So this is just a typical, what we do is we shoot videos. And so I want to invite you into one of our search warrants. We have a couple minutes worth of videos here, a couple different slides, and show you what we see before we actually start cutting plants and how we document. Maybe. Looks like it's not working. Let's see here. Let's do this. Oh. See if this works. Buffer. Well, looks like. Let's see. Yeah, it's not gonna work here. Looks like. Sorry, technology. Okay, so I apologize there. Technical difficulties is working in my office, but this is just a, that one, yep, okay. So what you're gonna see here is just a video of us walking through different search warrants, classic search warrant where residents hear the amount of environmental damage, the water diversions, the illegal growing. It's to see this personally as opposed to a licensed cannabis farm. There is a drastic difference in what you see here. And it really makes our job quite easy to document all this stuff and to charge all these different environmental violations because of these people are not regulated. And this is what's going on in the hills. And this is just one of many that are going on out there. So once we do serve the search warrant, people are arrested, they're taken to jail, reports are written, sent to the DA, returned to search warrant. So a judge wants to know what we found at the search warrant site. So we give them property sheets and give them a notice of what we discovered, what we have as far as the evidence goes. We leave a copy of the search warrant at the scene. We also leave a copy of what we've seized at the scene. Afterwards, we follow up with partner agencies and we ensure that the complaint is being filed. So as far as complaints go, we've had 2 complaints so far this year. Both have been related to a fish and wildlife search warrant. One has been cleared with no wrongdoing. The other one's currently being reviewed. Complaints are a part of the process here, what we do at the sheriff's office. It is, we have complaints come in from patrol cases and those kind of things. People have disagreements of how we do business. And it's part of us to listen. We're required by law to take the complaint and to investigate it, and then report back to the person that does complain as far as what the findings are. We don't talk about, if there's discipline, we don't talk about discipline. We just talk about, that findings were made. But I am proud of what our marijuana enforcement team is doing. They are a group of highly professional deputy sheriffs, and they're out there doing a very, very impossible task, putting in lots of hours, and they're making some headway. So there's the last slide, and I just appreciate your time here, and I'm open up for questions.
Supervisor Fennell?
Thank you very much, Sheriff. That's really, really helpful. The question about the complaints there, I know that there's probably one that I refer to at least.
Yep.
And you mentioned that both of them were tied to the fish and wildlife. So without going into the details, which I don't believe you can, but generally speaking, once you've established that you've arrived at an illegal marijuana grow and it is as you suspected and your warrant and all of that, do the officers then from the other agencies become involved in the search?
Absolutely. So that's a part. We all have a different role that we play in a search warrant. And when Fish and Wildlife is the lead, it's their probable cause. They wrote the search warrant, and a judge ordered them to help with the search warrant. They invite us to go along and to assist them with that. And just like we invite Fish and Wildlife on our search warrants. And so it's an opportunity for us to work together, and then we to have different focuses once we get there on scene. Fish and Wildlife looking at environmental damage. We're looking at the criminal aspect of things, and as far as the other things that go along with it. But you have Water Board and all these other regulatory agencies that are looking for those violations. So once the scene's secure, we all go out and do our different tasks, and then get together at the end and compare notes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Supervisor Wilson?
Just want to ask a question about the sort of the statement that you're saying the activities are putting some of these grows indoors.
Yes.
And are you talking about in houses that are served by electricity, or are we talking about generators outside the, what are you talking about? Can you give some description?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's both. There's electrical services that go all over rural part of Humboldt County, and they tap into the rural PG&E service. There also are diesel generators that are pulled out to barns or structures or under canopies in the middle of Humboldt County, in redwood forests, in different areas. And this is going on right now. This is what we saw in the 90s, where our enforcement effort, we believe, pushed people underground.
So a lot of some response to that for the ones that are hooked up to service was, some places like City of Arcata basically had a tiered tax to larger amounts of electricity used. Is that a tactic that we might consider for Humboldt County, within the county?
I am all in favor of that, sure. I know there's a huge cost according to that, because we've looked into that in the past. So cost to start that up, but But as something as a deterrent, absolutely. We want people to not do that.
And then sort of the amounts of diesel and sort of the structure by which people are receiving or having diesel for these grows. I mean, are people self-delivering that, or is that being delivered? And do the sites have, like, I mean, are we seeing, I assume that licensed places, and again, I mean, we are trying to move away from diesel generators, but we do have in our licensing that, you know, 10% of your electricity can be produced by diesel generators. But then also, those are going to be licensed and, double walled or
Right.
protected and all that other, all the stuff. But then we have locations like this, which I assume do not have all those safety things. Are they self-delivering, or are they being delivered to?
I think it's both, and to my knowledge, we don't have, as far as a professional delivery service, I don't think there's a requirement by the law to have any kind of verification, right, that they're a permitted grow or whatnot, and so.
Or that whether they're a grow or not, I mean, delivering
True.
to unsafe or unlicensed, fuel storage facilities, maybe something we should consider. Is that something that maybe in other counties, has this ever been done before, in basically asking the delivery service to confirm that where they are delivering to has those requirements, that they're not delivering to unsafe or unpermitted locations for fuel storage?
I have not heard of that in any other counties. So I'm not sure if that exists, as
Would
far
you
as that
mind looking
goes.
it up at some
I
point and
could.
ask
I could, definitely. Gotta
bring
know.
that information back? I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Supervisor Madrone?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Sheriff. I personally want to thank you and all your deputies for all the work you've been doing to try and clean up the environmental mess and the degradation that's occurring in our hills. And I made some comments several weeks ago that I think were misconstrued, and I just wanted to offer my personal apology for how those remarks might have been taken. I fully support your efforts and your deputies, and I know they work in very dangerous conditions for the most part, and so I just wanted to make that statement again. I made it last week as you were walking out, but I wanted to add that to this. And I do see that we've come a long way. I'm happy to see that. I'm hearing about a lot of cargo boxes being buried underground again and all kinds of indoor sorts of scenes happening. And like Supervisor Wilson, I think it'd be great to look at, when fuel deliveries are happening, that fuel's being poured into a tank. And is that tank got a double containment system? Those kinds of things. Are they safe storage? And is there a permit for an operation there? That seems to be a nice logical way to maybe put a stop to diesel deliveries to unpermitted grows and diesel storage systems that simply are not safe for our environment. So I fully support that approach. I have heard about some counties, I forget where it was, but that have gone countywide with what Arcata did on the electrical use, which is another great avenue to try and get at this indoor stuff if they happen to be on the grid, right? So those two things in combination might help us to start getting at some of that. I think that'd be great. I also think that there are some things going on with old legacy problems from old roads that were built by timber industry that now people are getting caught up in undersized culverts and other kinds of things. And some of that legacy stuff, I think it gets a little tricky, for DFW perhaps. So I have heard some concerns about that. But the thing that I mentioned several weeks ago, people making comments, they weren't my comments about your department, they were comments people were making. And I think that got confused in the media and other places. But really what I wanted to say was that if members of the public out there have issues, what I've heard from you over and over again, including today, is that file a complaint. If they do not do that, if they don't follow up, if they think something's been done wrong, and they don't file that complaint, they're not giving you the opportunity to respond, and I think that's wrong. So if people want to complain, do it formally. And that's what I hear you saying over and over again so that you can actually deal with these things. So I appreciate that as well. So anyway, thank you for your work and all of your deputies. So.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Supervisor Madrone. I just want to point out one thing. In the video, it points out that at that particular farm, there were two assault weapons that were taken. One was an AR-15 machine pistol, and those were dropped right outside of greenhouses when we got there to the scene. We believe people dropped them and ran. So there have been places, including here in Humboldt County, where we've had shootouts before within marijuana grows. And so I'm thankful that we have not had that this year, but our guys are always on alert because we hear it happening all over. And people are so desperate that they're willing to fight for, their farm. And so officer safety is always paramount on that. So thank you.
Just clarification on that, the video didn't run, but from my understanding from the officers, you run a video before you do the search, and then you also run a video afterwards. Is that correct?
That is correct. So one thing is we want scene documentation. Before we do the search warrant, we run high definition video, and then documenting the whole scene, what's growing, how it's grown, as well as the parcels and the houses and anything that we do search. Video, as well as pictures. And then afterwards, pictures and video are always taken to document how we left the scene. And this particular video also shows, our skid steer doing its job and moving the plants out of the way, and then what the condition of the parcel was like when we left.
Supervisor Fennell?
So I again want to say I very much appreciate this report, Sheriff. It gives us a really good idea of how things are moving. It's great to hear that there's a reduction in the illegal farms. One would hope that, and that it would get smaller and smaller, considering the fact that you can now grow cannabis commercially, legally.
That's right.
And I think the process is becoming clearer and clearer for people. And that is the way to go. And I do have concerns about the fact that you've identified, and I've heard this already, that there is a trend towards going indoors. And I see Back to the Future, back to whenever it was that people started doing that after camp. It was extremely problematic. And at the time, I know the Environmental Health Department was talking about containment of petroleum, because you couldn't assert that somebody was doing something illegal if they said they just needed it for their farm equipment or something like that. But the bottom line is, if you can identify and that there's a certain number, I mean, first of all, I'd like to know how many you think are out there. Maybe we really need to talk with the legal fuel distributors, and even if it's not in the law for them to require to deliver to a legal operation, an agreement with them. I mean, we're all doing business in Humboldt County.
Mm-hmm.
Why can't we have an agreement that they will ask, is this a licensed?
And I think that's a nice thought, but in reality is that the professionals that don't need it will gladly say, yeah, we'll do that. But it's the people that'll get a fuel truck and say, I'm now in business. And they will deliver wherever there's going to be a cash money. So that's the reality of that. But we can still try, and that's something that we can definitely look at and see how we can approach that.
So how you're going to handle that then is basically with complaints?
So we have, we've seen less over the years, but we still served lots of search warrants on underground containers, parcels that are diesel generators. So we do have our ways of finding out, and so I'm not going to give up those trade secrets here. But we do have ways, and that we will continue to do that. We, thanks to Measure S, we do have full year coverage in our marijuana enforcement team. And so those marijuana tax dollars are being used to support this and hold that accountability, and we are going to go year round. I do want to point out Sergeant Moore in the back. He's leading our marijuana enforcement team, and he's done an outstanding job. And so we have a game plan, and we're moving forward to make sure that cannabis enforcement is 365 days, because we know that's the reality of what's going on here in Humboldt. Yeah. So, and also I think what's really, really great is, we talked about it before, but also our complaints are coming from licensed cannabis operators. And so they're pointing things out. And so I appreciate that. And And some people will be surprised to hear that, but that is the reality. But also we have community partnerships. We had a great community meeting in Honeydew last week, and it was something that I highlighted, that we would have never done this 5 years ago. No one would have showed up for this. And we had people that were there that are interested in hearing from the sheriff's office and government about how we can help each other secure their licensed cannabis farms. And so it was very productive, and I think we're going to continue to do this. I hear Willow Creek wants to do something now, and we're working with the Humboldt County Growers Alliance. Tara and Madeline, thank you, because they're part of establishing the fact that we can trust government and law enforcement. And so I appreciate them being willing to trust us and partnering with these meetings and helping to get the information out.
Yeah, and thanks for mentioning that. I do appreciate everybody's help on throwing that together in a short 4 or 5 days. I think we had 50 to 60 people, and it was an hour and a half, 2 hours of very productive, very positive on 90% of it. On the fuel issue, just because I know a little bit about it, be careful what you wish for, guys, because I can tell you right now, we can shut down the deliveries, and what they'll do is you'll have that 3/4 ton pickup with a 500-gallon custom-made tank, which there are plenty of them out there, driving around our roads above our creeks and everything else. So we have to, and I know years ago when I was in the business, we pushed containment, and most of the tanks, when you see on display at any of the fuel places, have containment, and they suggest containment. We didn't see it in that picture, but it's there probably is a way to do that through the vehicles and everything else. But just like anything else, we've taken them out of the outdoors. We're driving them underground. I don't know if you want these guys hauling hazardous waste also at the tune of 500, 600 gallons, because it's a 500-gallon tank. Custom built is not very big, but they're going to be coming down that Alder Point Road. They're going to be coming down into Petrolia, those steep hills. Their brakes aren't going to hold up. At least the one thing we do have is we do have a registered hazardous waste vehicle licensed and getting an inspection every 3 months, hauling it now. So I think if we work with the companies, we did this 12, 14 years ago with the sheriff department, worked with the sheriff department. And there was actually with the Department of Environmental Health, in contrast with the fuel companies, and they actually made a handout, a little 10-page handout on how to handle those, fluids and everything else, and what they would face if they didn't do it right. So before you throw the hammer down 100%, you may want to try to, maybe we could enact that. So quite a few of the people do care about the environment. A lot of them don't, and that's the ones I appreciate you taking care of. So I do appreciate everything you've done.
Thank you.
I think the guys do a great job. I know they leave early, come back late during the season, so thanks. And with that, I'll open it. Did you have anything to say? For all those big grows you have in.
I find it fascinating.
Supervisor Madrone?
I would move that we accept the report from the Sheriff's Department.
Second.
Okay, with that, I'll open it up to public comment.
Appreciate the sheriff being here today and you folks being willing to listen. That's all great. Totally concur with Supervisor Wilson. The fuel is doable. I was informed before that a certain amount of gallons over is a felony if you're transporting without having the correct licenses and hazmat training. So that person this is how it goes. I was down at something down in Soham down there, went to a little meeting, and pulled into the gas station there. I was going to meet somebody there afterwards or something. That was a rendezvous point down at, I won't mention a renter, but anyway, it was their station. Somebody pulls up in a little Forester. They had one of these, a very small trailer behind it, and one of those 275-gallon tote things you see, which they filled up totally with diesel. I don't know, I can't remember, it's 13 pounds per gallon or 16. Mike could probably know what that one is. But I think they're running out like 3/4 or a ton of weight behind that little tiny vehicle, and it is a hazard. But just the fact of having cameras on site, and if you are here at this station filling up your diesel, we are going to know who you are assigned. Nobody is to take more than the legal limit which I thought was a contractor was 100 gallons or something. There's a limit in there way below that that's a legal limit, and that needs to be enforced. And it needs to be enforced just the same as I said before. The water trucks need to be enforced. Maybe we did something on that. I don't remember whether we ever really did hammer that. But if you hit these sources down, I bought my first container last week. 4,200 delivered up to my place in Suzy Q. It's for storage. I don't have a diesel generator. I'm not going to be growing with it. But they are selling, I think, a 40-foot container, used one, 40 by 12. Mine was a newer one, which was 8 by 20. Are selling for $1,800. So you can see somebody gets out there with a piece of equipment, buries that thing in the ground. Of course, not giving you any secrets, but they do have a hot spot, and an eye in the sky can find that in a heartbeat. So for those of you out there think you're going to get away with that, you're not. It's a very simple thing. In fact, I think I probably could even get the technology downloaded for a few bucks and start hot spotting around. So don't do it. You're going to get caught. You're going to be prosecuted. And Mother Nature's not happy with those people who are resorting to this thing. There is another way, as mentioned, to handle this. To endanger the environment is unforgivable, and karma will bite you somewhere that you don't want to be bit. So thank you for my opportunity to speak on this today.
Good morning, Supervisors, County Council, Sheriff. Tara Carver, Executive Director, Humboldt County Growers Alliance. Well, I'm happy to report it's harvest season in Humboldt, which also means it's rip-off season in Humboldt. And for the first time that I'm aware of, the community of legal cannabis businesses were able to call on the sheriff and have a discussion about how to not only protect their families, but their businesses. And there was nothing short of historic what happened out in Honeydew last week. Although I will counter your numbers. There were about 100 people to my count, about 2.5 hours. It got cold, and that's what ended the meeting, not because there wasn't a lack of dialogue. I am hearing from Willow Creek, Alder Point, and folks that they want to make this a roadshow and get to know their sheriff. And I say it's historic because the feedback that I've gotten was from second-generation farmers who have been living in the war on drugs and have grown up to not trust law enforcement. And at this meeting, they felt secure and safe enough to actually shake their hands and let me know that they will be calling if they're needed. So I think this is a major moment for Humboldt County, and we continue to lead, as we have been, on all cannabis-related issues. So thank you. And thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you. Anyone else? Supervisor Wilson?
One of the other items I think that a lot of us see around and is driving, and also when you're flying in and out at night, which is the greenhouses, which are just lighting it up all over the place, which we know are not compliant with our code. So would likely either they're operating with a license in an illegal manner, or they are in illegal operation. How are we addressing that? And I mean, I know our aerial surveys are during the daytime, right, typically. So do we have a way to sort of GPS or pinpoint these activities for the nighttime stuff? And are you going to give away a secret or not?
I'm not. So what I'm going to tell you is that we have a great plan. We have an awesome plan that we plan on implementing this wintertime, and I will talk to you offline about that.
Okay. Thanks. I just came in last week, and I was just, every time you fly in and you see those things, you just are so surprised. Like, this is still a thing. So thanks. We can talk about that offline.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing too. Yeah, I mean, you see all those glowworms, what I call them, out in the hills. It lights up a lot of southern Humboldt. So,
but even on 101, you can see them. You can see the silhouettes of the hills past. From the light coming up, backlighting. The canopy, which is shocking that people would actually do that in view of a main highway. So, I'm looking forward to seeing what we can do to get that under control.
Yeah, for sure.
And those being on south-facing hills and things like that, the generator noise, the humming, is very disconcerting for the people that live out there. Yeah. That's another issue. And to address, you can haul 100 gallons of fuel. That what I am saying is, and I'm sure these guys are really, really worried about complying to that 100 gallons as they take it to their illegal grow. What I'm trying to say is you have pickups hauling 500 and 600 gallons. which is 9,000 pounds, 8,000, and they don't have any safety features, they don't have any spill containment, they don't have anything else. They've got disc brakes, they don't have air brakes, which are required. They don't have all the avenues, the safety training and everything else. And if you think that's what the CHP is going to focus on, these guys are building flat tanks, filling the pickup bed, throwing firewood on the top. They're pretty ingenious, but that adds another avenue of disconcern traveling down the highway with that much fuel. So we've got to be careful on how we do that.
Just back.
Go ahead.
Just back to the glowworms, one of the real frustrations has been that I've gotten numerous complaints about those, and people can't quite say where they are because they're, a few parcels over or something like that. So I'll talk with you too to see if maybe your good plan will make it a little
Yeah,
easier
so,
to
yeah, we have a
pinpoint
plan,
those.
and John Ford and I will be working together to make sure that we got the right parcels, for sure.
Yeah.
I understand Supervisor Bohn's concern about, we don't want to proliferate illegal movements of fuel, but at the same time, all of those things add cost, and part of what drives these systems is that if the illegal market is so costly to produce that it doesn't compete well with the legal market, then that's really part of the equation, and we want to make sure that if you have to go through so much trouble just to make something happen, then oftentimes it doesn't happen as much. So I want to make sure we don't just consider these errant folks as if that's all free. So thanks.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, diesel was, back in the 90s, was 85 cents a gallon. It's pushing close to $5 a gallon delivered in the hills now. So their costs are pretty expensive, and they're running them. The proliferation is, so I don't know how much it'll end up being, but I know there are some people that have switched to it. So, and you're on it, because it sounds like you've got about 6 sidebar meetings. I think that the biggest thing is, and what I've heard and followed up on anyone that has had these issues, is the amount of checking and double checking when you do serve a warrant. When you do serve a warrant, I mean, there's a lot of go forth and go back and everything else. And as you know, as you saw driving out of Honeydew the other day, a lot of the illegal farms have a sign right at their gate with all their licenses laminated and posted, just like you'd have your safety posters, just like you have everything else. So when they come to the point of entry, everything's right there. You're not looking for, Bob takes care of all our paperwork, but Bob's in town. You don't, so not everybody knows. So what they're doing is they're taking copies and posting it. And that is, and I think most of the consultants are saying, have a go bag, have something out in front, have something, or put something up on just like you'd put on any business license, just so people are aware. Because, I mean, you go into a bar, you go into a grocery store, they have to have health standards, they've got to have their liquor license, they've got to have all that stuff posted. So that's what's coming up, I think, in the markets to make your job a little bit easier and to take the air, and obviously it's working because we have not had any errors.
That's right. So. Earlier last year, we had an issue where someone was maybe getting a state permit, we didn't know. And then the night before our search warrant, we verified and we got a phone call. Yes, the permit has just been in, and we didn't conduct that search warrant. And so it's that kind of communication that we have with our regulatory agencies that really make it effect, because we want to promote the legal market. We want to promote legal businesses and people that are going through the process. But we also have to recognize that people are using this process to hide behind. And like I said, we will be following up on some of these complaints that we've received, that someone are hiding behind those and are selling on the illicit market. And so we will be following up and maybe doing the search warrants this next year.
I think December 31st is their drop dead date. They won't be able to use that next season.
That's right.
Okay. All right. I think Supervisor Fennell?
Just one other thought I had. We're going to coming up with the Fire Chiefs Association presentation, and it occurs to me that not only we're dealing with environmental damage from illegal indoor grows, they're a huge fire danger also, so that's really, I mean, it's very, very important to try to tamp down that sooner than later, so.
I think he showed that on one of the pictures.
Thank you.
You bet.
That
Thanks,
was
Sheriff.
really true.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the report. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? All right. It's Public Safety Day. Let's invite the
Justin.
fire chiefs up here for the annual Fire Chiefs Association Services Report. Supervisor Fennell.
Thank you very much, Chair Bohn. So again, we've gotten used to this, and it's always a very, very important presentation, which is the presentation from the Fire Chiefs Association. This is the 2018 program, and Justin McDonald is the president of the Fire Chiefs Association. So welcome, Justin.
Thank you. Thank you for sponsoring this to be able to speak to you. I'm the president of the Chiefs Association, also the chief of Arcata Fire District. And as I was kind of going through, our organization is big and unique, and I want to just kind of touch on what we are. So we are an association of 38 local fire agencies, and that's from Orleans to Whale Gulch. It's a huge area that the association covers. It's our county is big, so it takes some persistence to get our group together, especially the chief from Orleans to come down to a meeting. Last one we had down south was in Petrolia. So that's a lot of drive time for people to get in this group. Our association also has a couple subgroups, the Southern Humboldt Fire Chiefs Association. Mike Lake is the president of that group. And then the Eel River Valley Chiefs gets together as well. We do have a couple other subcomponents, the prevention officers, to make sure, and you'll be hearing from us again on the prevention side as we adopt the new fire code this year. And then our Training Officers Association to make sure that we're pushing training out to all of our agencies in the county. I'd like to thank each and every member of those organizations, whether it's the fire agencies or those committees, for the dedicated service to our community. Without them, we wouldn't have a functional fire service. I'd also like to thank three important people to this project, our annual report. A big thanks to Sibel Emmett for project oversight. She has taken this on for several years, and thank God, because it's a pretty monumental thing. And this year, thanks to Dory Lonnie, I think for volunteering. I don't know if you had a choice. Andy Evans from County OES was the collector, the persistent poking at people to get their information in. And then Julia Cavala from Public Works, I believe, she did the editing on our report. And again, without these three individuals, I'd be up here talking, but I would not have a document to show you. The other side of it, I'd like to thank you guys as the Board of Supervisors and our community for, again, the continued support through Measure Z, Measure O. We have spent almost $6 million in the local fire service through those allocations. And these funds have allowed us to bolster our critically needed equipment such as air packs, fire hose, personal protective equipment, fire engines, and fire stations for our agencies. And I was blown away. I went to Nealon's grand opening of their fire station. They've had a slab up there for years and years and years. And out pops the Measure Z fire station. And when I compared it to what they used to have, the top picture is this rickety old barn, a one-station parking spot to, they can park 3 now inside. Talking with the chief, if you were lucky, you had one parked in the barn. If you weren't lucky, you had one parked in your front yard. And he relayed the story of a cold, snowy night walking out to the fire engine, waiting for fellow volunteers to help dig it out, and then hope the thing would start because it was so cold. This is huge. Measure Z has given Nealon and Telegraph Ridge and Orleans and all these other agencies a place to park their Measure Z funded equipment. By the way, 2 of the rigs parked out in front of Nealon are funded through Measure Z. The other side, we had a fire last week in McKinleyville, and product placement, right? Here's air packs with the sticker Measure Z funded on the back. We do that for, advertising purposes. But the neat thing was, it was a all-hands fire for us, and we invited most all of our neighbors to come play, Blue Lake, Fieldbrook, West Haven, and Cal Fire. And as I look around, our folks were wearing air packs and gear from Measure Z. West Haven showed up in their Measure Z funded fire engine with their air packs and their turnouts. So it's pretty impressive. And I know Sonny's not here to complain about the potholes down in Petrolia, but Measure Z has really made a huge difference in the fire service throughout the county. And that's the biggest thing that I see is, it's a countywide tax, and it's being applied on the fire service for large, small, it doesn't matter. As far as 2018, the fire service here in the county, we've crept over 15,000 incidents in the county, and our local agencies logged in over 119,000 hours in incident responses, training, maintenance, and fundraising. So of those calls, about 53% are EMS and motor vehicle accident related, 10% are fires, and then the best part is what the fire department's all about. It's everything else. So 37% of the calls are to go out and help somebody up off the ground, to, the proverbial cat in the tree. Whatever somebody is having a bad day and needs help, we get called and we come out to assist. Some of the challenges that our agencies continue to face is recruitment and retention of volunteers, and for those that have career staff, retaining and recruiting career firefighters. For those volunteer agencies, this issue is compounded by the ever-increasing demand on the incident response, as well as every year more training comes out, Cal OSHA, NFPA, all the regulatory agencies. On top of that, most of these agencies still are doing fundraising. I know down in Fruitland Ridge, you can go down and enjoy a great hamburger in the summertime. West Haven, you can get a blackberry pie, and that's a demand on volunteers as well. And then the other side of it, somebody has to fix the equipment, and that's again a demand on these volunteers to come in and work on their equipment. The other challenges all of us face is maintaining an adequate funding source to operate our agencies. And it is again imperative on fire departments that aren't districts. They don't receive the tax money, and they are solely relying on fundraising, and that's huge to be figuring out how you're going to fuel your fire engine because your fundraiser didn't work out so well. So last year, the Chiefs Association completed a strategic plan. It's been a long time getting through it. It's been a long process to make sure we represent all agencies from the south to the north to the east. And the purpose of the plan, as we went through it, was set two major goals for our association. One is to continue to collaborate with the county for maintaining adequate fire service. And again, I can't say thanks enough to what we get through funding through 172 funds, through Measure Z, through the partnership with risk management for the workers' comp, and just the support from you folks for all of our endeavors. The other major goal that we have is to clarify and increase communications of the association to our member agencies and also to the community. We need to be promoting the fire service in the county. And on the internal side, as the Chiefs Association, as new chiefs step up and take on leadership roles, we have to communicate with them on mentoring them. And I go back to Chris, who's the chief down in Palo Verde. He was the last one standing. They handed him the keys to the firehouse and said, "Hey, you're the fire chief now." And thank God he reached out to Lon down in Fortuna and was able to kind of get some coaching on being a fire chief. So those are two big issues that we're going to work towards. And again, I just want to say thanks for the continued support, and I encourage you to stop by your local fire departments and see how your investment for Measure Z and Measure S and 172 and any of these other things are working out. And any chance you get to go to these fundraisers, please come out and support your local fire service.
Supervisor Fennell.
Thank you very much, Justin. I mean, your report is wonderful. I love to have that on hand most times. Can refer back. I want to thank the CAO's office as well for working on a new way to help annexations or consolidations. We're seeing that right now with Riodell and Scotia and Redcrest, Shively, and part of the working out the logistics in that was that Redcrest already had a Measure Z allocation for building their fire station. So I think all of those things have made it a little bit more possible for all of these volunteers to do the remarkable job they do every day. And we're looking at a time, with climate change, with huge fires throughout California and other states. We're looking at a new paradigm where we have PG&E shutting off the power for fear of fire, etc. And what do we have as the backbone for when those events occur? And it's the people here and the people out in the volunteer fire departments. These are the people that we rely on, especially if you have a large fire and CDF is called out. This is who's going to be here to help us. And so I am really proud of Humboldt County for standing by our firefighters and appreciate all the work that you've done. I'm looking at a number of places that have new fire stations, and it's great. And I know that there are some things we have to work out as far as annexations, and we've been talking about the cost of dispatch and some of those other things, but we're going to work them out, and really appreciate everybody's work on that.
Yeah, you mentioned the power outage. It's all good and fine when the wind's blowing and they may cause a vegetation fire, but I was scared to death driving around McKinleyville and Arcata, and I was the unlucky person that had the duty that night for Arcata and saw people with candles. And so, yeah, our fire risk for vegetation fires went down. And knock on wood, we didn't have structure fires from somebody burning candles or things like that. So much like you said, do away with the diesel delivery, and now they got them in the back of their truck. I was sitting back there just shaking my head going, oh, please, let's not do that. But yeah, everything has that opposite and equal reaction when you try to do something out there.
Supervisor Madrone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Justin, for this report and all the members of our fire services in Humboldt County. For members of the public, we're not just receiving this verbal report now on our agenda package, which people can go to our website and look up. There are just tremendous details in short one-page summaries per agency, per department, and I just found these to be incredibly valuable for myself in terms of understanding what's going on in the district. I think in Supervisor Fennell's district, she has 19 different agencies and something like 7 in Supervisor Bohn's district and 10 in mine. And of course, the 2 urban districts have a few less, but they have probably a much greater population that they're dealing with in regards to the services in those areas. So it's not just about numbers of facilities, but numbers of people and all those things. So I just want to thank you and Sibel and others that put their efforts into this, the CAO's office, because the details in these reports not only say what happened in this last year, but what are the high priority needs within each of those departments. And I just found this to be really valuable reading for myself and great background. And so I encourage members of the public to look this up and to check out all those details. But once again, thank you and all of the fire folks for all your service. So.
Thank you.
Supervisor Wilson.
I really appreciate this annual report. Kind of every year I sort of review it and kind of focus in on sort of some different elements that I find interesting. And in this time, I really, it's not, I think people think of it just fire districts, but there's also these sort of technical search and rescue team organizations that are also listed in here that I think people should really be more aware about and supportive of. And I really am appreciative of this document, and anyone who wants to view it can go online and see it in our agenda, because it's just a great summary of each one of these organizations. And part of this too is we have to remember that so many of these are volunteer organizations. It's not just volunteers of firefighters per se, but really administrators, volunteer administrators, because you have to imagine every one of these has to deal with grant administration and budgets. And then, when we were just talking here about, sort of pestering these various agencies to get their information in and all that other stuff, someone on the other side's, the reason there's this pestering is because they're volunteers and they've got other things going on in their lives, and they're like getting it together and putting it in and getting it in on time. And so it's, I just think that, so we have to understand that if you look at those summaries, it also has all the volunteer hours, and the administration is a huge part of those volunteer hours. And I want to shout out to all those folks who are helping to just, keep that all together. And so with that, I'll move that we accept this report.
I would echo his sentiment that every organization has a fire chief, and I didn't realize, before I got to be fire chief at Arcata, and they have the same headaches and they have the same issues, and they're doing it for free, and that is pretty crazy. It's very impressive, and I have the utmost respect for those folks that step up, not only to just volunteer to be a firefighter. I did it at 19 years old. It was great. It was fun, but then to take on the next crazy step and to take on those headaches of leadership is pretty awesome. So utmost respect, and thank you for bringing that
because
up.
I think we're looking at the number is 95% of our firefighters are volunteers.
Yeah, just outside of Humboldt Bay and Arcata, the rest.
And I think the national average is somewhere in 80%. Right, and
Yeah.
is Blue Lake in the penalty box? You guys didn't let him sit with you.
He came late.
I mean, I can fully understand it. I just wanted to know for my own personal. But I think when you do that, and you talk about the numbers. I mean, it's a lot of work, and some of you have taken it to an extreme, and the importance of the volunteers, as I said, 95%, what it has to do with your fire ratings and stuff like that. And you're talking about the amount of time that, because every year I go buy 3 pies in West Haven. It's just, I have to. Sometimes I just drive up there, grab the pies and go. But the thing is, Fortuna, West Haven, all of these have ladies or auxiliaries, not just ladies auxiliaries, who are fully supportive of what their husbands or wives are doing when they volunteer. So it is truly, you take a look at Kenny and Lolita, you take a look at Fortuna, there's dads and their sons, or in Kenny's place, dads and all his daughters and stuff like that. But it's pretty amazing what they do on a volunteer basis, and how much time and effort. I know I served here, Sean, this is a blast from the past. Ray Lay was my chief when I was a volunteer, so that'll go back, who I just thought was a great man. And then Red Corder, but the thing is back then I think we went every other Tuesday night for a couple hours. I remember training once or twice on a weekend, and now with the academy that is run and everything else, the hours of training for a volunteer far exceed 100 hours a year, don't they?
Just the basic training is close to 200 hours, and then then you have your monthly training that goes.
And that's just for us to be able to, for like a lot of them, we do the comp insurance for them. And
I was going to say that makes risk management happy.
And that's it. So giving them the proper tools to do their job. And again, we say it every time, and in all retrospect with and respect to Sonny, I went out to Petroleum Honeydew twice this last week, and he's still not kidding. But I mean, with that, I just think the effort that the volunteers do, and then the support they get from the paid personnel, it's kind of amazing how much interaction there is done. And when you go to these fundraisers or Fruitland Ridge, and Petrolia's having theirs on the 2nd, and all these things, it's amazing how how many different departments come in to support. So I think I don't think we'll ever be able to say thanks to our community for Measure Z and Measure O, which is now just Measure Z again, for the sport. And like you said, $6 million. You see it everywhere. I don't think there's not a volunteer department that hasn't been blessed and been made whole and a lot safer from those funds. And that's the predominant thing we wanted to do. It was public safety. So with that, it's been Supervisor Fennell.
Well, you brought up the ladies auxiliary. The auxiliary, there's a great support systems out there, families who support the whole sense of family when you have the badge pinning and all of that is really beautiful. Mentioning Fortuna, I want to give a shout out to Captain Carmen Glass, okay, so.
First female captain.
Woman captain in Fortuna, and amazingly well-deserved, a great gal, and she's, I think, a wonderful leader. So just, again, that whole feeling of family, the last badge pinning in Fortuna, there was one family with 3 generations there. Brian Anderson, his son, and his dad. So it was pretty amazing, and really appreciate all of you guys and the work that you do, guys and gals. I might think of something else.
Well, no, one of us might think of something you want to add on, but Supervisor Bass.
Actually, I'm going. I'll give you more time. And no, the only comments I have, I think most have been already said. But this has always been one of my very favorite reports since my very first year on the board. And then we always had the copies, and I coveted those. I had them. I kind of miss them. I guess I could still print it out, but it's great that it is online and available for people. I don't think people understand the work that goes on, what the different calls are, how many people are there, the pictures, and I've got Dale in the audience. Yay, Dale from Samoa. Yes, I don't have as many as you guys do, but there's a lot of challenges over there, and Dale manages a lot of, I don't know how he keeps it all together, and it's the volunteers, and most people could not handle that. So thank you all that are the volunteers doing what you're doing, not getting paid.
I think
Is that Estelle coming through the phone on that side?
I
appreciate you.
I think the creativity, because if I'm not mistaken, last time I was over in Samoa, Dale is offering volunteers. If you want to volunteer, you can also, there's places you can stay. So he has, you have students staying there who are now volunteers, so the station is manned. And I think Fortuna was looking at building some stuff there. It's the creativity so that we can offer more. But, and I think that's what we have to do to keep those volunteers coming. So, and tell them we'll try to keep them as safe as possible. And so, Chief, thanks a lot. Really appreciate it. Public comment?
Ken Sawatsky, and Dale has water in his hydrants over there now. That's a good thing. One phone call, another phone call happened. When people don't pay their share, just so you know, Rex, the 4th row here is for people from Blue Lake. That's why he's sitting in that. It's reserved. That's why we sit there. He's not being ostracized. But if people don't pay their share, I go, or do the right thing, I go after it. So if you have a sovereign nation, let's say, that quit contributing to process and yet are taking the things, then those are the kind of things that I do. Same as the hydrants. Doesn't take much to fix these things, and it's going to get fixed. I want to thank Ray for putting up with me. I have been talking to Arcata. I was going to lecture Amy a little bit, but she's not here today, so I'm not going to lecture Alicia. But you can talk to Amy. The core used for this money for Measure O or Z, go back to Z, is to be for these people, for the sheriff. And you're going to need to claw back the money that you put out to all these other things because sales tax are going down and their needs are going up. That's just how reality is regarding Measure Z funding. Arcata, currently, if I recall right, and I could be corrected, has an assessment of right around $96 per parcel. That's a single-family parcel. Blue Lake, there's a lot of angst between Ray and me, is at $36 per parcel. Arcata needs to have close to twice that much to function. What are their choices? Well, they can take and shut down the facility in McKinleyville, consolidate their both, and they will be left with those decisions unless the voters are going to basically be broken. I think Fortuna is, what, 76, Estelle? You probably have that number in your head, something in that area per parcel. But for 196 for people, out there in a small trailer park or something like that, they cannot afford this. The county's going to have to start, about 1.5 million is what they're going to need. And you're going to have to find ways to claw back that money, see that you continue to fund the small departments as you have, but you're also going to have to fund some of the larger ones. The way to fund this is not through property tax on an assessment, it's through a sales tax. You have it in place. You're just going to need to reappropriate that money where it belonged originally and bite the bullet and face the facts. So I'm right here pleading for you to consider in the next budget, considering funding the Arcata Fire District for an additional approximately 1.5 or whatever it takes for them to continue to service. Otherwise, they'll have to shut something down, and we don't want to have that happen. We don't want it with the sheriff. We don't want anything. Taxpayers think it's the public interest to use that money appropriately, and I think that's the way to use it. So thank you for my opportunity to speak about this. Thanks for everything they do out there. I mean, they are fantastic guys, the volunteers and everything. So, and Ray has to put up with me. So
I feel for you, Ray.
I am not tag teaming with Kent. I swear I'm not tag teaming with Kent. Every time I come north on 101, coming out of Ferndale or Fortuna, I pass where the sheriff's posse is responsible for maintenance near the Lolita overpass. And that reminds me of the time the sheriff's posse spent all night looking for my sister Phyllis, who was out trying to figure out why the donkeys were acting crazy and they had no water at the house. Well, we found out it was an illegal grow up by their tank that had caused these problems. She fell, she hit her head, and even though they looked for her all night, she brought herself back to the house when she came to. She has, anyway, and then I remember also when Tim Ash stood here this May talking about the strategic plan for mental health that came out of behavioral health, wherever it came from. Y'all know the alphabet soup better than I do. But saying that I'm so glad you asked me to do this because now we can all work toward the same goal. We don't have the money yet, but we're all working toward the same goal. We truly are doing better. Thanks.
Thank you. Seeing no one else from all of us, thanks, guys. It's been moved and seconded. All those in...
I had one more. Just, I wanted to recognize what was brought up related to the Nealon Firehouse, and I was present there at the celebration a couple weeks ago, and I want to say that it's kind of just the beginning, that shell, and I want to remind the community that, you know, you put that shell in there, and there's all kinds of visions and efforts to improve upon that and put offices in there and everything. But I want to say these firehouses and these new structures are more than just firehouses. That's a new community building, and there's a lot of activities that are going to revolve around that I think are going to go well beyond just public safety. And so I really appreciate that, you know, that connectivity that you guys provide in all those services. So thanks.
Supervisor Fennell? Just checking.
If you want.
I figured you had something.
I could talk
All
with these
those
guys all day long.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Thank you. Thanks, guys. Girls. I'd like to welcome our clerk of the board up to the podium.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I come before you today to introduce this agenda item for your consideration to make an appointment for the 2019-20 member and alternate to the California State Association Board of Directors. Each year, CSAC makes a request that the respective boards of supervisors throughout the state of California appoint their member and alternate prior to the beginning of the first day of the annual CSAC conference, which this year it begins December 3rd. I should also mention before you consider this item that Supervisor Bass is currently serving on the CSAC Executive Committee. She also is the current president of the CSAC State Association this year, and that in and of itself allows your board to consider making an appointment of a member and alternate outside of her service to that association. She will next year be the ex officiate officer for that association, so that appointment of a member and alternate still stands for your consideration.
All right. I'll bring it back to our Supervisor Bass.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yeah, it seems like a strange process, but at least when you have an officer, you do get to have a separate, you kind of get additional input. I do want to say, not this next year, but the year after that, I am interested in going, hopefully staying on as the board member at that time. But for this year, I know that currently Supervisor Fennell has been very involved. I don't know, after that last agenda item, I'm now rethinking whether it's going to actually, no. Just don't say too much on this one. I know that she is respected on the board, and so I think she should stay on as the regular member. And who is the alternate? Supervisor Bohn?
Supervisor Bohn.
Well, I'll wait to hear from the rest, but I do know that Estelle was interested, and I suspect Supervisor Bohn could be as well. I don't think he's actually had to be called into anything yet, though. We've covered most of it.
I've been to a few meetings and stuff, but not just to stay in line. And sometimes they line up with the RCRC and stuff. So,
yeah.
With that, Supervisor Madrone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would move that we appoint Supervisor Fennell as the member and Supervisor Bohn as our alternate.
Yep.
Second.
Okay, fine. Third.
Been moved and seconded. Any public comment? Seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Okay.
Thank you.
Bet. All right. We have, gonna make it, I think. We have an 11 o'clock time set, guys, so. Planning and Building Department? CAO?
Yes,
Oh.
thank you, Chair Bohn. So on August 20th of this year, staff brought before your board an item to approve a waiver of the Calpers 180-day waiting period in order to allow Mr. William Evans to continue his work in that department as the Department Information Systems Analyst, and allow for him to impart on the incoming staff that will fill those duties to share his institutional knowledge with them. It has come to our attention that that item, per Government Code Section 7522.56 F1, says that this item must be resolved by your board through a departmental item in public forum, and so that is here today to gain approval from your board so that Mr. Evans can continue his work with the Planning and Building Department.
And just for a point of clarification, when we do these retired annuitants, they retire and we hold them till we can fill the position or they can pass on the knowledge that they have and they get no retirement, they get their benefits, they just get a straight hourly wage. Is that right?
Correct.
And rage.
They pursue their retirement and then they get
they get their retirement. We just don't pay.
Yes.
We just don't pay any more into their retirement as a retired annuitant. Correct. So their costs are actually beneficial to us as we transition into somebody taking their place and passing on their knowledge.
Correct.
Okay. We just get this every once in a while that they're taking somebody's place. They're not taking somebody's place. They're teaching somebody to take their place most of the time.
Precisely.
Thank you very much. Supervisor Madrone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would move that we adopt the attached resolution for an exemption to the 180-day wait period of the California Public Employees Retirement System, Calpers, for the employment of William Evans as a temporary retired annuitant, Department Information Systems Analyst with the Planning and Building Department.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any public comment? Seeing none, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Thank you. And we will retire into closed session at 11 o'clock. And if the county council would, what? Your hand came up.
It did. I was pointing to her.
To do it. Yeah.
Okay.
I think
If you could,
we should actually wait, Mr. Chair, until exactly 11 o'clock.
we are going to wait, but if you'd read it into the record, that will give everybody a chance to. Oh.
I think, well,
We're going to take a 7-minute break and come back here.
so yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. We do have 5 matters for closed session. For today's agenda, the first matter is a performance evaluation for the position of the county council. The second matter is a conference with legal counsel in the matter of Jeffrey Blank versus County of Humboldt. The third matter is a conference with legal counsel in the matter of Jeffrey Blank versus County of Humboldt. The fourth matter is a conference with legal counsel in the matter of Jeffrey Blank versus Lisa DiMatteo et al. The fifth matter is a conference with legal counsel. This is in the matter of Deborah Avenmarg versus County of Humboldt, Jeffrey Blank et al.
Okay, with that, I'll open it to public comment.
This falls under the category of what I refer to as Amy Gate. You have, I'll start from the last one. I never did hear a report out whether you were going to defend your county council, Jeffrey Blank, as an employee working under the capacity of his thing or not. So I guess that one never was reported out, or I didn't get it if it was. You have 3 lawsuits that are all related, in my opinion, to a whistleblower complaint. And it's just a shame that people have to go to the extent of litigating to get the attention of the board and staff here to get a message across. That should never happen. I mean, this is ridiculous that we're spending all of this money, 6 months on paid administrative leave, and I don't care, insert F-bomb here, what he did. That has nothing to do with this other employee thing with the whistleblower complaint. That's just, to me, is a complete separate item, and if you think there's something justified, the whistleblower complaint should be followed through. My grandson is 8 years old. He's in 3rd grade. He's level 10 autistic and extremely smart. And he has an expression, and his expression is, "How dumb is that?" The words of the children. So as far as I can tell, you had a whistleblower's complaint. It was or was not brought to your attention. In my opinion, it was legitimate. I have multiple public records requests will show me what's happened. And if I don't get all those sheets on the record request, even if it's black paper, been totally redacted, that's going to be a duplicitous request. I will probably, if I need to, have an attorney follow through. I'm going to get to the bottom of exactly what happened here with that money. Now, the how dumb is that was retroactively approving what I believe was a misappropriation of funds, not opening a new account with a new title that could have been used for employee negotiations if that's what it was being used for, or all the other things it was. You got some terrible advice as far as I'm concerned, that why would you continue to use an account, put money in an account that was tainted and is linked to possible criminal activity, when you could have just renamed the account and put the money in it, and you could say what you want the account to be used for. Instead, you have somebody else said this back in 2008 or something, what that account was for. I'm getting the records, and then I think you would be interested in seeing what I get, and then we'll all be on the same page. So I will be sharing my public records request with all of you to see what I say is based upon, and all I can do is go by my perception and my Kent Sawatsky non-Esquire. But until I hear differently or find out differently from my requests, I will continue to go down Amy Gate in this rabbit hole. Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no other public comment, we will go into closed session. I hate that. It's a lot like you. Lagging.
Yeah.
You ought to see this kid's trying to overcome his coaching the other day.
Oh, Lord.
So, Mr. Chair, with regards to item numbers 1 through 4 on the closed session agenda, there's nothing to report out. With regards to the 5th matter, the matter of Ms. Avenmark versus County of Humboldt and Jeffrey Blank, the county is retaining Attorney Mark Vey to represent Mr. Blank and has authorized the risk manager to sign the associated professional services agreement.
Thank you. And with that, we are adjourned for the day. Thank you very much. Alicia, very good job. Thank you.